The shovel bit into the earth with a satisfying chunk, and Vila, Aaron's daughter, leaned on the worn handle, wiping sweat from her brow as dawn painted the valley in tentative gold. Her shoulders ached from hours of work, but 6 neat rows of seedlings now stood ready to greet the sun. The weathered iron shovel had been her father's, and his father's before him, its wooden handle smooth from generations of calloused hands, strange symbols carved along its length worn nearly invisible with time.
"You've been at it since before light,"
came a voice behind her. Old Joram stood at the edge of the communal field, leaning heavily on his walking stick.
"The fields won't run away if you sleep occasionally, girl."
Vila smiled, driving her shovel into the soil to stand upright. "Sleep is for winter, Uncle. These seedlings needed to be in before the quarter moon." The old man hobbled closer, peering at her work.
"They didn't look strong. Always do when you plant 'em."
He didn't say what everyone in Terraville knew. Crops fared better under Vila's care. Not enough to call miraculous, not in these hard times, but enough to be noticed. "Just good soil," Vila said reflectively, the response automatic after years of deflecting such observations. The Empire did not tolerate those who seemed different. Joram's eyes crinkled.
"Your grandmother's waiting. Says she needs your strong back today."
Vila nodded, gathering her tools. As she pulled the shovel from the ground, she didn't notice how the soil clung to the metal, reluctant to release it. Grandmother Mara's cottage sat on the northern edge of Terraville, closer to the old burial grounds than most were comfortable living. Vila found her sorting dried herbs, her gnarled fingers moving with surprising dexterity.
"Ah, finally,"
Mara said without looking up.
"The ground spoke of your work before you arrived."
Vila set down a basket of fresh greens. "I brought lunch, and the ground told you nothing, grandmother. Your joints did." Mara's laugh was like dry leaves rustling.
"Believe what you will."
She tapped a small clay pot.
"Take this ointment to your mother for her hands. Then I need you to help me at the stones."
Vila stiffened. "The boundary stones? Grandmother, the Imperial decree—"
"Means nothing to the dead,"
Mara finished.
"or to me, at my age. The spring reinforcement cannot wait."
"It can wait until night," Vila argued. Mara's eyes, despite their cloudiness, fixed on Vila with unsettling intensity.
"Some tasks must greet the sun, child. Bring your father's shovel."
They worked through midday, Vila digging small trenches around the ancient stone markers that formed a perimeter around the burial grounds, while Mara followed, sprinkling mixtures of herbs and soil into the fresh cuts in the earth.
"These stones were placed by your ancestors' ancestors,"
Mara explained, though Vila had heard the story countless times.
"They mark where our people rest, when they return to the soil, where they nourish what comes after."
"I know, grandmother." Vila leaned on her shovel. "But the Empire forbids the old ways. They call it primitive superstition."
"Course they do."
Mara straightened as much as her bent back allowed.
"Because they take from the land without giving back. Their fire magic consumes but never nurtures."
Vila glanced nervously toward the village. "You shouldn't speak of old magics."
"Who will hear? The stones?"
Mara snorted.
"The Khazrians tried to bury our knowledge, but the earth remembers. The soil holds our stories."
A horn blast from the village interrupted them. The imperial tax collectors had arrived. Vila stood with the other villagers in Terraville's center as imperial soldiers in gleaming armor flanked a pale man in flame-embroidered robes. Tax collector Revik read from a scroll, detailing new levies to support the emperor's grand expansion. "Additionally," he concluded, "by order of His Imperial Majesty, the lands north of the village, previously designated as ancestral grounds, have been reassigned for imperial resource extraction. Geological surveys indicate significant deposits of fire crystals beneath the soil. A murmur ran through the crowd. Vila felt her grandmother's fingers dig into her arm.
Those are our burial grounds! Someone called out. Our ancestors rest there!
The Khazrian fire mage beside Revik stepped forward, his angular face showing nothing but contempt.
Your primitive customs are of no concern to the Empire. Your dead are dead. They serve no purpose lying in the ground.
They nourish the soil, Vila said, before she could stop herself. They return to the earth that fed them. The mage's eyes found her, cold and assessing.
Ah, quaint local beliefs.
He turned to Revik.
Make note of this one.
Revik scribbled something, then continued.
Excavation begins tomorrow. Any interference will be considered treason against the Empire.
Our crops will die without the blessing of the burial grounds.
Mara's voice rang out, stronger than her frame suggested possible.
You take our grain and taxes, yet you would kill the very fields that provide it.
The mage sighed dramatically, flicking his fingers. A jet of flame shot forth, igniting the nearest field of young wheat. Villagers cried out as the carefully tended crops blazed.
Consider this a reminder of where true power lies, the mage said. The Empire doesn't need your pitiful fields. We have conquered 9 kingdoms and will soon add the southern continents to our glory. Your contribution is a formality, not a necessity.
As they departed, Vila held her grandmother back from confronting the Imperials. Not here, she whispered. Not now. Mara's eyes were fixed on the burning field, tears cutting channels through the dust on her cheeks.
The land will remember this too.
That night, Vila woke to an empty house. Her mother slept, exhausted from fighting the field fire, but her grandmother's bed was vacant. Vila immediately knew where she had gone. The burial grounds were eerily quiet when she arrived, the moonlight casting long shadows from the boundary stones. She found Mara in the center, kneeling before the oldest marker, a slab of granite worn smooth by centuries. "Grandmother," Vila whispered, "you should be resting." Mara didn't look up from where her hands pressed against the soil.
I am almost finished.
Vila moved closer, then gasped. The ground around the central stone emitted a faint, pulsing glow, like a heartbeat beneath the earth. Mara's hands seemed to sink slightly into the soil, as if it were yielding to her touch. "What are you doing?" Vila knelt beside her.
Waking them,
Mara breathed.
our ancestors, the old protectors. The Empire comes to desecrate their rest, they must be warned.
"Grandmother, please. This is forbidden magic. If they catch you..."
Not magic. Connection.
Mara finally looked up, her eyes reflecting the earth's glow.
I have not the strength to finish. You must maintain the vigil until dawn, when the boundary is thinnest.
"I don't know how..."
Your hands know.
Mara pressed Vila's palms to the soil.
Your blood knows.
Vila felt a strange tingling where her skin contacted the earth. A subtle, pulling sensation. The soil was warm despite the cool night, almost alive beneath her fingers.
Promise me,
Mara whispered, suddenly looking every year of her considerable age.
Stay until first light. Complete the circle. They must not break the ground tomorrow.
I promise, Vila said, unease creeping up her spine as her grandmother shuffled away toward the village. The old woman seemed to have aged a decade in a single night. Left alone, Vila settled beside the central stone, one hand resting on the soil, the other gripping her shovel. The strange warmth flowed up her arm and visions flickered behind her eyelids. Faces she didn't recognize, yet somehow knew. Voices speaking in a language she'd never learned, yet somehow understood. The boundary thins. The circle weakens. The fire comes. Vila's eyes snapped open as footsteps crunched on the path to the burial grounds. The eastern sky had just begun to lighten, the promise of dawn still minutes away. Her back ached from hours of keeping vigil, and her mind felt foggy with half-remembered dreams. Voices approached. Imperial soldiers. Vila scrambled behind the central stone, clutching her shovel. Through the pre-dawn mist, she counted 5 armored men accompanying a robed figure.
"This is the place,"
said the mage, different from the one in the village. His voice was deeper, resonating with authority.
"The old power sleeps beneath. I can feel it, even through their primitive wards."
Vila's breath caught. This was no ordinary mage. His robes were deep crimson, embroidered with gold symbols that seemed to shift in the dim light. When he pushed back his hood, his skin looked wrong, too tight around his face, with faint fissures revealing a molten glow beneath. With terrible certainty, Vila realized who stood before her. The Emperor himself, the Demon King, transformed by forbidden rituals that bound fire spirits to human flesh. The most powerful wielder of flame magic in the known world. The Demon King knelt, pressing a hand to the soil near one boundary stone. He hissed, jerking back as if it burned.
"The old protection still holds," he growled. "Barely. Break the stones!"
2 soldiers moved forward with hammers. Vila's promise to her grandmother burned in her mind. Without thinking, she stepped from hiding. "Stop!" The soldiers whirled, weapons drawn. The Demon King turned slowly, eyes narrowing as they fell upon her shovel.
"A tender,"
he said, voice like grinding stone. "How unexpected.
I thought we had purged your kind generations ago."
Vila had no idea what he meant by tender, but held her ground. "These are our burial grounds. Our ancestors rest here." The Demon King laughed, the sound cracking like a whip.
"Rest? No. Their power lies dormant, girl. Power that rightfully belongs to the Empire."
He gestured dismissively.
"Remove her."
A soldier lunged forward. Vila swung her shovel instinctively. The iron head connected with his helmet with a resonant clang that seemed to echo far beyond what was natural. The soldier crumpled. The Demon King's expression shifted from amusement to calculation.
"That tool. Bring it to me."
Vila backed away, gripping the shovel tighter as the soldiers advanced. The carved symbols on its handle seemed to pulse against her palm. "It's just a farming tool!"
"Is that what they told you?"
The Demon King's cracked lips pulled into a smile.
"Your ancestors were cleverer than I credited, hiding their greatest artifacts as common implements, passing them through bloodlines disguised as heirlooms."
Vila retreated until her back pressed against the central boundary stone. The soldiers spread out to surround her.
"Your shovel, girl, is a root key, a tool of earth power. One of the artifacts we thought we destroyed during the purge."
Flames began dancing around the Demon King's fingers.
"Give it to me, and you might live to see another sunset."
The ground beneath Vila's feet trembled slightly, almost like a warning. The eastern sky blushed pink with imminent dawn. Her grandmother's words echoed.
Stay until first light. Complete the circle.
"These grounds are protected," Vila said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. "You have no right to this place."
"Rights?"
The Demon King's laughter sent sparks flying from his lips.
"I am the Empire. I take what I want."
He raised his hands, and fire bloomed between them, forming a sphere of intense flame.
"Last chance, farm girl."
Vila's options collapsed to a desperate few. The soldiers blocked any escape route to the village. Fighting was futile. Running was impossible. So, she dug. The shovel plunged into the soil beside the boundary stone with unnatural ease, cutting through the earth as if it were water. Vila worked frantically, not knowing why, only feeling that the ground itself guided her movements.
Stop her!
The Demon King commanded, but as the soldiers rushed forward, their feet seemed to tangle in suddenly yielding soil. The ground where Vila dug began to glow with the same pulsing light she had seen beneath her grandmother's hands. The first direct ray of sunlight crested the eastern hill, striking the central stone and reflecting onto the blade of her shovel. The Demon King snarled and hurled his fireball. Vila ducked behind the boundary stone, expecting destruction, but the flames curved around the stone as if deflected by an invisible shield.
The old magics won't save you!
The Demon King growled, stalking forward himself.
Your kind always relied on passive defense. That is why you fell so easily.
He reached the boundary stone, flames wreathing his body, eyes glowing like twin forges. The stone began to smoke where his presence touched it. Vila, backed into her freshly dug pit, raised her shovel in a final, futile gesture of defiance. The Demon King reached for her with a molten hand, and the first sunbeam completed its journey, illuminating the exact spot where Vila stood. The burial ground erupted with light. It poured from the soil, from the boundary stones, from the very air. The Demon King screamed, more in rage than pain, and lunged. Vila swung the shovel in pure reflex. What should have been a glancing blow instead sank into the Demon King's chest, as if his body offered no more resistance than loose soil. His expression transformed from rage to shock, as the shovel blade plunged impossibly deep. For one suspended moment, they stood frozen, Vila wide-eyed, the Demon King impaled on her family's farming tool. When he spoke, his voice was different, human, odd. The circle was broken when they buried your kind's knowledge. Blood, not fire, trickled from his mouth. The fire within him flared once, brilliant and blinding. Then his body crumbled to ash, collapsing into the freshly turned soil. A small flame, no larger than a candle's, lingered momentarily where his heart had been, then shot skyward toward the imperial capital. The soldiers, witnessing their emperor's fall, fled in terror. Vila stood alone in the burial grounds, shovel in hand, as the boundary stones pulsed once more with light before fading to ordinary rock. The only evidence of what had occurred was a patch of unnaturally fertile soil where the Demon King had fallen, already sprouting tiny green shoots. By midday, Imperial forces swarmed Terraville. Vila huddled in her grandmother's cellar as soldiers ransacked homes, searching for the peasant murderer who had somehow slain their emperor.
You must leave immediately,
Mara whispered, stuffing dried food into a sack.
They will not stop until they find you.
I can't leave you, Vila protested.
You must.
Mara pressed a small clay pouch into Vila's hand.
Soil from the burial ground. Keep it with you always.
She reached out, tracing the symbols on the shovel's handle.
This tool has awakened your blood. It will protect you if you trust it.
I don't understand any of this, grandmother. Mara's eyes were sad.
I know. We kept you ignorant to keep you safe. A mistake, perhaps, but our choices were few.
She led Vila to the back of the cellar, pushing aside an old shelf to reveal a narrow tunnel.
The old escape ways. All the village elders know of them, though we have not needed them in generations.
Where do they lead?
To the eastern forest. Seek Erlen, the herb woman. Tell her the soil stirs again. She will know what it means.
Heavy pounding on the cottage door startled them both.
Go!
Mira pushed her toward the tunnel.
I will seal it behind you.
Vila hesitated. How will I find this Erlen?
The shovel will guide you. It knows the old paths.
Mara embraced her fiercely.
Remember what you saw in the burial grounds. The truth lies buried, but not lost.
Vila clutched the shovel, feeling oddly grounded by its weight. I'll come back for you.
I will be here,
Mara said. though something in her voice suggested she believed otherwise.
The village protects its own. Now go.
Vila entered the tunnel, looking back to see her grandmother pushing the shelf back into place, sealing her into darkness. For 3 days, Vila followed the twisting underground passages by touch alone, the shovel strangely warm in her hands, always pulling her subtly eastward whenever she reached the junction. When she finally emerged, blinking in the harsh sunlight, the imperial capital lay far behind her. The eastern forest stretched out before her, ancient and imposing. Vila adjusted her pack and stepped into the dappled shade, letting instinct and the strange pull of the shovel guide her. By sunset, she stood before a small cottage nearly hidden by climbing vines and moss. "Hello?" she called, approaching cautiously. The door creaked open. A tall woman with silver-streaked black hair regarded her with sharp eyes. "You're one of Mara's, ain't ya? I see her in your face." Her gaze dropped to the shovel. "And you bring trouble with ya." "Are you Erlin?" Vila asked. When the woman nodded, she continued, "My grandmother said to tell you, the soil stirs again." Erlin's face tightened. "So it begins anew." She stepped back from the doorway. "Come inside, quickly. The trees have been whispering of Imperial scouts nearby." The cottage interior was hung with drying herbs and lined shelves of clay pots, not unlike her grandmother's home. Yet subtle differences. Symbols carved into beams, strange crystalline formations on the windowsills, suggested that this was no ordinary herbalist's dwelling. "You killed the Demon King," Erlin stated, not a question. "It was an accident," Vila said. "My shovel, it shouldn't have been able to—" "Your shovel's a root key." Erlin gently took it from Vila's hands, examining the faded carvings on the handle. "One of the last. Your family preserved it through generations, disguised it as a common tool." "The Emperor called it that too. A root key. What does it mean?" Erlin sighed, returning the shovel. "It means you have much to learn and little time to learn it." She gestured to a chair. "Sit. I must tell you of things long buried, of earth tenders and element binders, of the balance that was and might be again." Through the night, Erlin spoke of a time before the Khazarian Empire, when different creatures lived in harmony with their elemental affinities. Fire, water, air, earth, and the spaces between. The earth tenders, Vila's ancestors, had not been the most powerful, but the most essential. "Your people didn't command the earth as Khazarians command fire," Erlin explained. "You communed with it. Through you, all elements found balance. The root keys were common tools of communion, allowing tenders to access the earth's memory and channel its nurturing power." "Why were we destroyed?" Vila asked. "Because you were the keystone." Erlin's expression darkened. "Remove the keystone and the arch collapses. The Khazarians didn't want balance. They wanted dominance. Their fire magic could only sustain itself by consuming other elemental connections." "But my family survived." "A few did. Those who could hide their abilities as simple farming talent. Those who buried their root keys or disguised them as your family did." Erlin produced a small box from beneath the floorboard. "I was no earth tender, but I was a friend to many. I preserved what I could." The box contained a handful of soil, a dried root shaped like a hand, and a scrap of parchment covered in symbols matching those on Vila's shovel. "What do I do now?" Vila asked. "You learn," said Erlin. "Quickly." Learning came in fragments over the following weeks. Vila discovered that her lifelong connection to growing things had been more than farmers' intuition. It was her heritage, diluted but not destroyed by generations of suppression. Under Erlin's guidance, she practiced simple earth communions, feeling the soil's composition through her bare feet, coaxing reluctant seeds to sprout with whispered encouragements. sensing the paths of underground water sources with gentle taps of the root key.
Your power is connection, Erlen emphasized repeatedly, not domination. You don't command the earth, you speak with it. Listen to it, become its partner.
Vila found that her ability strengthened with practice. Soil clung to her skin when she channeled power, sometimes sprouting tiny seedlings along her arms. When fully connected, her eyes took on the deep brown of fertile earth, and plants leaned toward her as if seeking sunlight. Their relative peace shattered one morning when the forest erupted with imperial horns.
Flame gods,
Erlen hissed, peering through a window.
Dozens of them. The tracking mages.
Vila grabbed her pack and root key.
We have to run.
Too late. Erlen barred the door. They've surrounded us. She turned to Vila, decision hardening her features. There's only one way you continue from here. Before Vila could question her meaning, Erlen retrieved a small clay pot and pressed it into her hands.
Mix your burial soil with this soil. Quickly!
Vila obeyed, combining her grandmother's soil with Erlen's mixture in a small bowl. Outside, orders were shouted as the flame guards organized their assault.
Now what?
Vila asked.
Knowledge transfer, Erlen said grimly. An old earth tender technique modified for desperate circumstances.
She rolled up her sleeves, revealing forearms covered in tattooed symbols matching those on the root key.
I cannot pass power, but I can pass memory. Some of my memory, at least.
The cottage door splintered under Imperial axes.
We have no time for preparation,
Erlen said, plunging her hands into the soil mixture.
Join with me.
Vila thrust her hands into the bowl, fingers intertwining with Erlen's amid the soil. The moment their skin connected through earth, visions flooded Vila's mind. A lifetime, not her own. Knowledge she hadn't earned. Secrets preserved through decades of hiding. The door gave way. Flame guards poured in, faceplates hiding all but their eyes, hands raised with fire dancing between armored fingers. Vila saw Erlen stand, placing herself between Vila and the Imperials. She spoke a word that made the cottage plants surge with unnatural growth, vines entangling the first wave of guards.
Run!
Erlen commanded, her power already failing against Imperial fire.
Complete what was begun!
Vila fled through the back window, the mingled soil clutched in one hand, her root key in the other. Behind her, the cottage erupted in flame. She ran blindly, grief and rage and newfound memories tangling in her mind. Erlen's knowledge, fragmented but vital, settled like sediment within her consciousness. Histories of earth tenders, locations of secret sites, rituals of communion hidden for generations. And one memory, sharper than the others. A hidden valley where refugees from conquered cultures had established a community beyond Imperial reach. Vila evaded pursuit for 2 days before a shadowy figure emerged from the forest ahead of her.
You make enough noise to wake the dead,
the man said, his Imperial accent unmistakable despite his ragged appearance. Burn scars covered one side of his face, and his hair was unevenly shorn.
It's unfortunate for you I'm the one who found you, Earth Tender.
Vila raised her root key defensively. Who are you?
Torin Ash, he replied, keeping his distance. Once Imperial scholar, now Imperial traitor. And you are the shovel-wielding peasant who somehow killed Emperor Karzik.
He offered a mocking bow.
The Empire's placed quite a bounty on your head.
Are you here to claim it? Vila shifted her stance, ready to fight or flee. Torin laughed without humor.
If I wanted you captured, I had let the fire guards find you yesterday when you slept beside the stream.
He gestured to his scarred face.
The Empire and I have irreconcilable differences.
What do you want?
The same thing you need. Sanctuary Valley.
He pointed eastward.
I can guide you there, where others like you have found refuge. In return, I want to document your awakening.
My what?
Your elemental awakening. Your connection to Earth's power.
Torin's eyes gleamed with scholarly intensity.
I've spent years researching suppressed histories to witness a genuine Earthtender emerge after generations of Imperial denial. It confirms everything I've uncovered.
Vila hesitated, uncertain whether to trust this strange, scarred man. But Erlen's transferred memories included vague impressions of the Sanctuary Valley, and Torin's directions matched them.
Lead the way,
she said cautiously. But know that this will defend me if I need it. She raised the root key. Torin eyed the shovel with scholarly curiosity.
I have no doubt.
The Sanctuary Valley revealed itself after another day's journey, a hidden depression in the mountains, accessible only through a narrow pass easily defended. Within its protected boundaries, a small community thrived. Wooden structures built around living trees, gardens in careful cultivation, and people of varied appearances and dress.
Survivors from 9 conquered cultures,
Torin explained as they approached.
Some have maintained connections to their elemental heritage. Others are simply refugees. All share one trait: rejection of imperial dominance.
They were greeted with suspicion that transformed to cautious welcome when Vila demonstrated her earth-tender abilities by healing a blighted apple tree with a touch of the root key. Among the valley's inhabitants, Vila discovered others with elemental connections. Seraph, a grim-faced man who could sense water sources with uncanny accuracy. Liana, an elderly woman who predicted weather changes through communion with air currents. And a handful of others with minor talents, not enough to challenge imperial power individually, but seeds of what once existed.
Your arrival fulfills an old prophecy,
Seraph told her one evening. His usual skepticism momentarily softened.
That's when the fire consumes itself. The earth will rise to restore balance.
I'm no prophesized savior, Vila protested. I'm a farmer who had a lucky swing with a shovel.
A root key, Torin corrected, joining them. And luck had nothing to do with it. The earth recognized you, responded to you, as it does now.
Vila couldn't deny this. Since arriving in the valley, her abilities had strengthened considerably. Under the guidance of the elders, she had learned to channel earth energy to bring moisture to parched soil, accelerate germination in struggling seeds, and even create stable tunnels through soft ground. Yet, disaster struck when drought threatened the valley's crops. Despite their elemental talents, the community's water sources began to fail under unnaturally dry conditions.
Imperial weather working,
Seraph growled, after another inspection of the dwindling springs.
It can't find us directly, but they're affecting their entire region to flush out resistors.
The community council debated options, from rationing to relocation. Vila listened silently, and felt a pull from the root key leaning against her chair. It seemed to sing against her skin, urging action. Let me try something, she said finally, interrupting heated arguments. My grandmother performed rituals at our burial grounds to maintain fertility. Perhaps... Skepticism met her suggestion, particularly from those whose lands had suffered under imperial agriculture policies that had prioritized Khazarian crops over indigenous food plants.
Your people's connection to the land was stronger than most,
Seraph acknowledged reluctantly.
But tenders always required established sites of power, burial grounds, groves, stone circles. We had none of those here.
Every place where people live becomes sacred in time, Vila countered, remembering her grandmother's teachings. This valley has been your home for generations now. Your connection to it matters. After much debate, desperation drove them to accept her proposal. That night, Vila and the council stood in the center field, where the drought's effects were most visible. Following instinct and fragmented memories from both her grandmother and Erlen, Vila drove her root key into the parched earth. The carved symbols on the handle glowed faintly as she knelt, pressing her hands onto the soil on either side of the upright shovel.
Words in an ancient language she somehow understood flowed from her lips. For 5 long minutes, nothing happened. Doubt crept across the faces around her. Then, slowly, moisture began to seep upward from deep underground, drawn through invisible channels toward the surface. By morning, while not fully restored, enough of the gardens had been saved to prevent immediate crisis. "You access quite the deep aquifer," Seraph said, amazement mixing with lingering suspicion in his voice. "Something we've tried to do and failed since settling here." Vila, exhausted from the night's work, managed a tired smile. The earth remembers those who remember it. The successful ritual earned her greater acceptance within the community, but more importantly, it demonstrated the potential of renewed elemental connections. A breathless messenger interrupted their evening meal a month later.
"Imperial news," the young woman reported. "The new Demon Queen's ascension is failing. Without the Emperor's guidance, the fire spirit is consuming her rather than empowering her."
Torin frowned.
"The princess? They forced the ritual on her too soon."
"The flame fears diminishment," added Lyanna, the air listener. "Without the Demon King to control it, it seeks to preserve itself through greater consumption."
"What does this mean for us?"
someone asked.
"Means the Empire grows desperate," Torin explained. "They're accelerating resource extraction throughout the conquered territories, burning through what remains of other elemental connections, strengthening their fire magic."
Vila thought of her village, her grandmother. "What of Terraville?" The messenger's expression turned grim.
3 villages in that province were burned 2 days ago, suspected of harboring Earth-Tender descendants.
Vila's world contracted to a single, terrible point.
"Names. Give me the names."
The messenger recited them. Terraville was among them. The root key, propped beside her, vibrated with her grief and rage. The ground beneath the community hall trembled slightly. Cups toppled. A thin crack appeared in the earthen floor, running from Vila's feet to the central hearth.
"Vila," said Torin cautiously, "control your connection. The earth responds to strong emotion."
She fought for composure, forcing her breathing to steady. The trembling subsided, but the crack remained. That night, Vila placed her root key upright in the soil outside her dwelling and knelt before it in the moonlight. She pressed her grandmother's burial soil into the ground around the shovel's blade.
"Show me," she whispered. "Show me if any survived."
The earth didn't speak in words, but in impressions. Faint sensations of roots spreading, seeking, connecting. She felt the distant echo of familiar soil, Terraville's earth, scorched but not dead. Within it, the faintest pulse of life remained. Not many, but some had survived. Relief mingled with renewed purpose. Vila raised her head, decision crystallized.
"What are you planning?"
Torin asked from the shadows where he had been observing. "The Empire has declared war on the very ground they stand upon," Vila answered. "It's time the Earth answered."
The Sanctuary Council rejected her initial proposal. "We barely have enough power to maintain this valley," Seraph argued. "You suggest we reveal ourselves, travel to remaining villages with Earth-Tender heritage, and try to awaken dormant connections? The Empire would crush us before we reach the second village." "They're already crushing us," Vila countered. "Village by village, culture by culture. If we wait until we're strong enough, there will be nothing left to save."
"The prophecy speaks of earth rising when fire consumes itself," another elder noted. "The Demon Queen's transformation falters. Perhaps we should wait for the Empire to collapse from within."
Vila shook her head. "And how many more will die while we wait? The longer the Empire burns unchecked, the less remains to rebuild from." She planted her root key on the council hall floor. The argument continued for days, until Torin provided unexpected support. Imperial archives contain references to elemental confluence. Strength and an effect when multiple traditions work in concert. Earth tenders are crucial, because they form connections between elemental powers. He looked at Vila. If she can reawaken enough dormant earth tenders, they might serve as conduits to strengthen all our abilities.
The council remained divided, but enough supported Vila's plan to proceed. A small group formed around her. Torin with his knowledge of Imperial movements, Seraph representing water connections, and 3 others with various skills and elemental affinities. Their journey through Imperial territories became a dangerous game of awakening and retreat. In villages with Earthtender heritage, Vila would find those with latent connections, often unknowingly manifesting as farming talent or healing ability, and use her root key to activate their dormant power. Some joined their growing movement. Others, too traumatized by generations of oppression, refused involvement or even betrayed them to Imperial forces. After each near capture, their group would scatter along planned escape routes, regrouping at predetermined locations.
"You're making a difference,"
Torin would assure her, after a particularly narrow escape.
"Word is spreading. People are remembering."
"Not quickly enough," Vila replied, watching Imperial smoke rise from yet another punished village on the horizon. "The Empire burns faster than we can rebuild." Their fragile momentum shattered when Imperial bounty hunters ambushed them near the western mountains. Led by Archmagus Vex, the Emperor's former geomancer, the attack demonstrated a frightening adaptation in Imperial tactics. Rather than relying solely on fire magic, Vex wielded dissation spells specifically designed to counter earth power. Where Vila attempted to raise earthen barriers, the soil crumbled to dust. Where she tried to channel ground moisture, it evaporated before reaching the surface.
"Your earthborn is predictable,"
Vex gloated as his forces surrounded their group.
"Every elemental connection has its counterpoint. You nurture, we wither. You build, we break. You connect, we isolate."
Vila drove her root key into the ground, desperately attempting to create an escape tunnel. The earth responded sluggishly, fighting against Vex's influence. "Take the others and go," she told Seraph. "I'll hold them back."
"You can't fight a desiccator alone," he protested.
"I don't intend to fight." Vila's hands trembled as she channeled more power into the soil. "Just delay." The tunnel finally opened, a ragged hole barely wide enough for one person. As her companions escaped, Vila maintained her connection, sweat beading on her forehead as Vex's spells fought to collapse her working. When only Torin remained, he grabbed her arm.
"You have to come now."
"Someone has to close it behind you," she insisted, "or they'll just follow."
"Then I'll stay."
"You know more about the Empire than anyone. They need you." Vila shoved him toward the opening. "Go!" He hesitated, then squeezed her shoulder.
"We'll find you."
After he vanished into the earth, Vila released her hold. The tunnel collapsed immediately, sealing her companion's escape route, and her own. Vex approached, flanked by soldiers.
"Surrender the root key, Tender, and your death will be quick."
Vila stood, legs trembling with exhaustion, and raised her shovel.
"Try and take it."
"Commendable foolishness."
Vex flicked his fingers, and the ground beneath Vila turned to powder, causing her to stumble.
"But ultimately, futile."
The soldiers seized her, wrenching the root key from her grasp despite her struggles. Vex examined it with a distaste.
"A primitive artifact. Hard to believe it killed an emperor."
He gestured to the soldiers.
"Bring her. The Demon Queen will want this one alive for the Ascension ceremony."
Vila's imprisonment blurred into days of darkness and disorientation as they transported her to the Imperial capital. Without the root key, her connection to the earth felt muted, though not entirely severed. Even through stone walls and iron manacles, she could sense the soil far below, calling to her blood. They brought her to a circular chamber deep beneath the Imperial palace. Dozens of other prisoners were already there, chained to pillars around the room's perimeter. In the center stood a raised platform where the new demon queen awaited. Princess Lyrian had changed drastically since her forced ascension. Her skin had developed the characteristic fissures of the fire spirit possession, but unlike her father's controlled manifestation, hers spread chaotically across her body. Flame leaked from the cracks sporadically, and her eyes fluctuated between human fear and inhuman hunger. "The last earth tender," she announced, as Vila was chained to a pillar. Her voice oscillated between a young woman's and something ancient and burning. "How appropriate that you witnessed the completion of what your kind sought to prevent." Despite her monstrous transformation, Vila recognized something familiar in the princess's flickering expressions. Terror, confusion, pain. This was not the calculated cruelty of the former emperor, but the desperate flailing of someone drowning in power they never wanted. "You're being consumed," Vila said. "The fire spirit isn't merging with you, it's replacing you." The demon queen flinched. "Silence! I am becoming transcendent. The ascension merely requires sacrifice." Archmagus Vex stepped forward, presenting Vila's root key.
"The artifact, Your Majesty, as requested."
The demon queen reached for it, then screamed as her fingers neared the handle. The carved symbols flared briefly, repelling her touch. "It rejects fire," Vila said, "as the earth has always rejected domination."
"Then we shall destroy it." The demon queen's voice deepened to the fire spirit's rumble. "After you fuel my final transformation."
Vila finally understood the purpose of the gathered prisoners. "You're going to sacrifice them. Burn them to strengthen your bond with the fire spirit."
"Their deaths will transform the base metal of
My humanity into the gold of divinity," the demon queen confirmed, flames intensifying around her. "And you, Tender, will be the final offering. Your earth connection will complete what my father began. Total elemental dominance." As guards moved among the prisoners, selecting the first victims, Vila strained against her chains. Without the root key, her power remained frustratingly limited, yet she could feel the earth beneath the palace, distantly, like a whispered conversation from another room. The first prisoners were dragged to the central platform. Their screams filled the chamber as the demon queen enveloped them in flame. With each death, her fire grew stronger, the cracks in her skin widening to reveal the elemental entity consuming her from within. Vila closed her eyes, pressing her bare feet against the stone floor. Beneath layers of imperial construction, she sensed something familiar. An ancient connection point, a convergence of earth power, buried but not destroyed. With sudden clarity, she realized where she was. The imperial palace had been built atop an earth-tender sacred site. The revelation came with recognition of the symbols carved into the chamber's stone floor, the same patterns that adorned her root key's handle, now positioned on a pedestal near the demon queen, just out of Vila's reach. More prisoners were sacrificed. The demon queen's transformation accelerated, her human features barely visible beneath the fiery entity emerging. The air in the chamber became nearly unbreathable with heat and the stench of burning flesh. A commotion at the entrance disrupted the ritual. Imperial guards fell as water suddenly gushed through the doorway, sweeping them aside. Seraph appeared, his water connection manifesting more powerfully than Vila had ever witnessed. Behind him came others from their scattered group, and Torin, who had clearly guided them through Imperial defenses. "The root key!" Vila shouted as chaos erupted. "Get the root key!" Torin fought toward the central pedestal, while Seraph's water magic battled Vex's desiccation spells. The demon queen, enraged by the interruption, unleashed a wave of flame that sent rescuers and Imperial guards alike diving for cover. In the confusion, Vila's chains were struck by a stray fire blast, weakening the links enough for her to break free. She stumbled toward the center of the chamber where Torin had reached the root key, but now faced the Demon Queen directly.
Give me the tender tool!
The Queen commanded, her voice now entirely the fire spirit's inhuman roar. Torin looked from the artifact to the monstrous figure before him.
Your Highness, this transformation is killing you. The records show no human host has ever survived complete possession. I will transcend humanity!
Flames erupted around her, forcing Torin back. Vila reached them as Torin tossed the root key to her. The moment her fingers closed around the handle, power surged through her, stronger than before, amplified by the ancient sight beneath them. The Demon Queen attacked with a fire column that would have incinerated Vila instantly, but the root key responded, its blade splitting the flames like a boat's prow dividing water.
You built your palace on sacred ground,
Vila said, advancing despite the inferno surrounding her.
Earth tender ground!
Recognition flickered in the Demon Queen's increasingly inhuman eyes.
The Imperial founding. The first Emperor claimed this site for its power nexus. Not fire power, earth power.
Vila drove the root key's blade into the stone floor, which cracked with surprising ease.
You've been drawing from a well you don't understand.
The floor split wider, revealing rich soil beneath Imperial stone. As the root key sank deeper, tendrils of green immediately sprouted around its shaft, plants that had waited centuries for light and connection. The Demon Queen shrieked, flames roaring toward Vila in a desperate assault. But from the widening crack, roots erupted upward, ancient, gnarled conduits of earth power that had survived beneath the palace since before the Empire's founding.
Your fire magic can only sustain itself by consuming other elemental connections,
Vila said, remembering Erlin's words.
You severed those connections, but you couldn't destroy them completely.
The roots spread rapidly, forming a network across the chamber floor that glowed with subtle power. Where they touched imprisoning chains, metal corroded instantly, freeing the remaining captives.
What have you done?
The Demon Queen demanded as the roots approached her platform.
Reminded the earth of what was buried here.
Vila channeled all her strength through the root key, feeling connections spreading far beyond the palace. A vast network of dormant power points suddenly resonating with renewed purpose.
And now, it remembers.
The root key plunged deeper, connecting to the ancient root system that had once linked earth tender sites across the continent. Power surged outward along those forgotten pathways, temporarily restoring elemental connections for people throughout the Empire. Miles away, a farmer's hand suddenly glowed as they touched soil. A fisher sensed currents with newfound clarity. A mother's lullaby carried on the wind with unexpected power. Thousands experienced momentary awakening to their ancestral gifts. In the chamber, the Demon Queen's flames fought the advancing roots, creating a catastrophic imbalance as elemental powers clashed directly. The palace shuddered under the strain.
The confluence is unstable,
Torin shouted over the growing cacophony.
The palace will collapse.
The Demon Queen screamed as roots wrapped around her platform, connecting with the earth power rising from below. The fire spirit within her, sensing greater power, hesitated, then abandoned its human host to merge with the elemental surge. Lyrian collapsed, suddenly human again, as the fire spirit dispersed into the root network. Other elements answered, moisture condensing from the air, breezes swirling through widening cracks in the walls, fire dancing along root pathways without consuming them.
We need to leave,
Seraph urged, helping free the last prisoners. Now! Vila wrenched her root key from the floor. The momentary elemental confluence had overpowered the ancient structure's foundations. Stone groaned as the palace began to tear itself apart. They fled through corridors already crumbling, Torin carrying the unconscious princess while Vila directed them through the chaos. Behind them, the ritual chamber collapsed entirely, burying the ancient site once more, but not before its awakening had sent pulses of power through the land.
Weeks passed before Vila could return to Terraville. The village was partially rebuilt, survivors emerging from hidden forest camps to reclaim their homes. Her mother lived, though grief aged from Mara's loss in the Imperial burning.
She saved many, her mother said as they stood before the fresh grave in the burial grounds. Led the children to the old tunnels before facing the soldiers herself. Vila placed her hand on the soil covering her grandmother. The earth welcomed her home. And what of you? Her mother asked. Will you stay now? Vila looked toward the horizon where imperial smoke still rose from conflicts ignited after the palace's fall. The empire fractured as regions reclaimed their elemental traditions, but centuries of suppressed knowledge could not be recovered overnight. Many awakened individuals struggled to control their abilities, causing unintentional destruction.
There's more to do, she answered. More connections to restore.
Her mother nodded, unsurprised. Your grandmother always said you were meant for more than just our fields. The new council of tenders awaited her in the central village, representatives from all elemental traditions who had gathered in Terraville after news spread of its resistance. They faced challenges from both imperial loyalists who fought to maintain control and radical elementalists who sought revenge rather than balance. Among them all sat Torin, documenting everything in his ongoing history, and Seraph, whose initial skepticism had evolved into grudging partnership. Even Princess Lyrian attended, haunted by her experience but determined to make amends for imperial sins. Vila stood before the council, root key in hand. Its wooden handle had sprouted small green shoots along its length, a manifestation of power no longer dormant. The shovel was no longer disguised, but had become something between a tool and a living thing.
We begin with knowledge, she told them. What was buried, what was forgotten, what was stolen. The earth remembers, and now we must too.
That evening, Vila walked to the edge of the burial grounds. The boundary stones glowed faintly in the twilight, their protection renewed. Beyond them, the horizon smoldered with distant conflicts as elemental powers resurged chaotically across the fractured empire. Vila drove her root key into the soil, feeling the vast network of connections spreading outward, wounded but healing, disrupted but reknitting. The shovel pulsed with the heartbeat of the earth, neither triumphant nor defeated, simply alive and waiting for the next season of growth. The work would take more than one lifetime. The balance would take generations to restore. But the soil remembered, and now, finally, so did those who tended to it. Vila looked to the future, her hands covered in the dirt of her ancestors, and began again.